Hello, BookTube. It's time for essay. I've already actually recorded one, but I received two books today in the post, and I thought I'd read one from each, because the one in here is extremely short. We'll start out with William Dana Orcutt's From My Library Walls, A Kaleidoscope of Memories, and that was published by John Murray in 1946. And there's Orcutt, looks like, and probably in his library with a manuscript on his lap, and the title page. Now, the one I will read is called the Vatican Hospital for Sick Books, and he goes through a description of restoration. It's a little cumbersome, but it does make a sort of sense. I know it's changed now in 70 years basically, but it still makes sense. But it's just an interesting little article, so I thought I'd read it. And these were articles. He does state here that the author wishes to express thanks to the Christian Science Monitor for permission to include in this volume sketches which originally appeared in part or whole in that publication. Thanks are also due to Messrs. Little Brown and Company for permission to make use of certain anecdotes and material which originally appeared in a different connection in the author's earlier published volumes. The Vatican Hospital for Sick Books. He was called Monsignor Eugene Tesserant, curator of the Oriental Manuscripts and vice prefect of the Vatican Library, when he gave me the photograph which now hangs upon my library wall. Today, the tall, scholarly, genial friend of my Roman research days wears a crimson cardinal's robe. Monsignor Mercati, to whom Achille Ratti turned me over when he became cardinal, delegated Tesserant, his assistant, to be my guide and mentor, and from that experience we became friends. But when I glance at the clear, penetrating eyes looking out so kindly from above the heavy brown beard, my mind associates him not with the rare items from which the Vatican Library is famous, but rather with books that are seemingly so destroyed by time or fire, or bookworms, or carelessness, or accident, as to be beyond all hope of preservation. For it was Monsignor Tesserant who, more than any other one man, developed the Laboratorio Vaticano, the Vatican Hospital for Mutilated Volumes, into a unique institution. Here, since 1890, miracles of bibliographical surgery have been accomplished. The library is unquestionably one of the most interesting exhibits at the library. The laboratory is unquestionably one of the most interesting exhibits at the library, yet few visitors ever see it. After once discovering it, I would stop in for hours at a time, sometimes with Monsignor Tesserant generously explaining the various processes and describing his personal experiences in solving the problems presented by the various patients, and sometimes attaching myself to one of the workmen and following the treatment of a special case through its progressive stages. I found the workmen there as interesting as the work upon which they were engaged. To an Italian, his labor is perfunctory performance of a habit or joyous expression of an art. In the laboratory, they were all artists, keenly pleased by my interest in their work and proud to demonstrate their skill. Nor was I the only one who asked questions. Were the manuscripts and printed books in America so damaged as these on which they are working? Did we do work like theirs in America, and were the methods the same? Each called my attention to some detail that he thought I might have overlooked, thus making the various processes even more clear than when Monsignor Tesserant had explained them in general terms. I wonder if I can give you an idea of the work on the parchment and handmade paper volumes, each of which required an entirely different technique. On the parchment, there are only three processes: patching, inlaying, and overlaying. The patch is used to strengthen any breaks in the parchment. The overlay, when it can be made without blocking out letters in the text. The inlay, when the break comes up against the hole. Great care is taken to have the parchment used in repairing exactly match the mutilated page in color and thickness. With his material in hand, the workman places the damaged leaf on a glass plate beneath which are electric lights. The portion to be treated is skillfully outlined. Then, with a razor-sharp blade, a corresponding patch is cut from the new material, the edges of which are carefully skived. On the edges of a thin solution of gelatin and pure acid of vinegar is rubbed, this forming the strongest adhesive known. Once the patch is in place and the adhesive dry, no portion of the page is more permanent. After making the inlay, both sides of the edges to be joined together are covered with a thicker solution of the adhesive. The handmade paper patients offer more complications. The page under treatment has to be covered on both sides by pieces of invisible gossamer silk, which becomes a permanent part of the page when coated with thin solution of the adhesive gelatin. If the manuscript is a fragment, the silk is cut to the full size of the leaf. The next step is to cover the silk and the fragment with thin Japanese mulberry paper, again applied with the adhesive solution. When the paper is still wet, the workman deftly scrapes the mulberry paper from the fragment, leaving the manuscript covered only by the invisible gossamer silk, while the silk itself on the blank portion of the leaf is now covered with paper. Thus, when the reverse side is given the same treatment, the silk is entirely concealed between the two sheets of paper, and the damaged leaf, now the exact size of the volume from which it is taken, is hung up to dry. Then the wrinkled and buckled page is run between rollers, and when restored to its place cannot be detected from those which required no treatment. I question the action of the moisture on the ink written letters. Monsignor Tesseract smiled and remarked, "The ancient scribes never learned how to adulterate their materials. Never have I seen such dexterity in execution or such delicacy of touch as those workmen displayed. I have seen what I thought was skillful overlaying and inlaying executed by American experts, but nothing such as these masters showed. Of course, there has never been a demand here to develop such proficiency. It was unbelievable to inspect a discharged patient and find myself absolutely unable to discover the presence of the silk or the edges of the overlays. The unrestrained joy of the workmen over my frank expression of admiration for their skill added to the pleasure of the experience. Never shall I forget the friendliness of these enthusiastic artist workmen. The laboratory was intended to repair only volumes belonging to the Vatican Library, but rare exceptions have been made whenever such a manuscript is of sufficient worth to make its preservation imperative, Monsignor Tesseract explained to me. One of these exceptions is the extraordinary successes of the library achievement in repairing the 50 Coptic manuscripts which are now in the Morgan Library in New York. If any of my readers ever examine these with this story in mind, they will scarcely believe that these manuscripts were considered past all recovery when acquired by Mr. Morgan. Where are the successors of these skilled workmen now? Have their trained fingers been turned to repairing human wounds caused by the horrors of war? Or are they performing some hateful service as slave laborers in Germany? Each time my library wall yields me a happy moment with the Italian memory, it is followed by the anxious question of the present and the future. Then I find refuge in the old Italian proverb, "The sun is always shining over the hill." Yeah, I think the process is a bit different now to a certain extent, but it's similar that you fill up the hole, or you brace up and connect the two pages if it's two pieces if it's torn, and then if there is a hole, then what you do is you get a little patch the inlay, and then you put it into the the whole and just build it up with probably it's usually Chinese paper to the thickness of the paper and matching obviously the color and everything. And then the overlay would be used to for fragments and stuff to keep a page, like, so you got a little bits and pieces of the original page, so you need to have a backing for it, and then you put another piece over top, and then you get rid of the if it is opaque, then you get rid of the paper over top of the fragment, so and then it just the edges, and it just blends in nicely for that. That's how I understand it's done today, my limited knowledge of it. But it did make sense through what he's saying. But he says, permanent glue. I don't think they use that now. I think they use substances that can be reversed very easily in case it will cause damage in the future or something better comes along at some point. But anyway, that's the first one. The second one here is Fragrance Among Old Volumes by Basil Anderton, and it's Essays and Idylls of a Book Lover. City Librarian, Newcastle upon Tyne, Fellow of the Library Associates. This is 1910 by Keegan Paul Trench, Turbner and Company. And the title made me think that it's just a Fragrance Among Old Books. So I was thinking that it was going to talk about the smell of old books, but it's not. It's something completely different. So I was a bit disappointed with that. But the very last essay is just a page or a chapter here. So I thought I would read that one because it's very short. It's The Old Bookman's Retreat. When he is grown old, and bread-winning is become a weariness to him, our bookman, if he have but enough savings, will journey to a sunny place he wots of, where a little town is perched high above the world on the top of a steep hill. There is a citadel in it for safety, a cathedral for beauty, and a library for delight. And some tranquil rue to echo where the world's din and vexation shall be but as memories to him, or as a half-heard rumor, he will live out his quiet remnant of his days. He will bask in the hot sunshine, will walk at his ease under long avenues of elm trees, sit at the foot of cool grey ramparts overlooking the long levels of the fields beneath, and anon at home among his books, will pore over the old volumes, gathering up the threads of thought which, in a life filled with diverse occupation, had remained disunited and elusive. Perchance, too, using such art of style as is within his faculty, he will himself add a little to the melody of life by writing upon the things that are a joy to him. His long fidelity to books will have brought him discernment and a not trivial sense of beauty. In such pursuits will the evening of his life be spent, an evening luminous and calm, not lacking its sunset radiance. So I kind of like that. It sort of ends off quite nicely. I just was confused with the wording here, and I haven't looked it up to see, but he starts at the it's still the first sentence, but near the end of the sentence is, if he have but enough savings, would journey to a sunny place he wots of, W-O-T-S. And that confused me, but that's what it says. It must be an archaic work that I just generally don't have it come across, or not often. But no, yeah, and there's some other interesting ones. In this, it's there's two book plates in it, which are kind of neat. There's two different owners, I assume. More central one is a GDL Horsberg, and then a James Wilson down below. So that was kind of interesting, and it's just a collection. And it says he expresses my thanks to the editor of the Book Lovers magazine and the Journal of Education for permission to reprint articles contributed to those periodicals. Proprietors of Book Lovers magazine, moreover, were good enough to give me the blocks used to illustrate the articles published by them. I have to thank Mrs. L. Clay for permission to use her drawing of the Isle of Ulysses. Lastly, I am grateful to my brother Mr. H. Osmond Anderton and to my friend Professor J. Wright Duff for valuable advice on different points. And there might be a couple others. I haven't read them all. I've sort of skimmed through. I read the fragments one. It's basically about two little teachers that wear fragment flowers when they go to do their research in their local library for their lectures. Anyway, I will leave it there. As I say, I've already recorded one, but I'll put this one up actually first, and then we'll use the other one for tomorrow. Take care, BookTube.